I froze as Caleb laughed while she tore me apart on the live stream. My own sister, calling me toxic and pathetic in front of the entire family, and he just stood there, smirking. My chest burned, a mix of rage and disbelief, because I had spent 13 years propping him up, pouring money, time, and hope into his life while he spat on my loyalty. My hands shook, gripping the edge of the couch, watching every humiliating word replay over and over. How could the people I trusted most become my public executioners? If you're enjoying this, please subscribe and share. Your support keeps the stories coming. I closed the laptop with a snap, but the humiliation did not fade. Instead, it carved a deep line through my chest, a line I knew I could turn into power. It was in that moment I noticed something glinting on Caleb's wrist, a watch, sleek and unmistakable, my father's vintage Rolex, the one I had helped him purchase years ago. My stomach dropped. My trust, my silent sacrifices, mocked right back at me. He had stolen it, and there it was, paraded like a trophy at his wedding. That night, I could not sleep. Every memory of lending him money for his failed business, covering his bills, even co-signing his loans, flashed like a montage of silent betrayal. I had been invisible, the unsung hero behind a brother who never once thanked me, who now humiliated me to strangers across the globe. But beneath the anger, a plan started to form, cold, precise, unstoppable. I was done being the quiet supporter. I was done being the one everyone underestimated. The next morning, I went through my files, legal documents, financial statements, every loan, every transaction I had ever backed for him. My hands moved methodically, a rhythm I had practiced in my quiet, secret life of preparation. There was no turning back. Caleb had shown his true face, and now it was time the world saw the consequences of underestimating me. Each paper I touched felt like armor, each number a weapon, each signature a silent promise that betrayal would be paid in full. I spent the next week in a haze of quiet fury, moving through my own home like a ghost with a mission. Every drawer, every file cabinet, every digital folder became a weapon in disguise. I traced every bank transfer I had made, every co-signed loan, every business expense I had covered for Caleb. The more I dug, the clearer the path became. He had been living off my quiet sacrifices, thinking I was blind, thinking I was weak. I was neither. Emails, invoices, credit statements, I collected them all, documenting months of reckless spending, unauthorized withdrawals, and his continual exploitation. I even pulled records from his condo management and company vehicle accounts, showing a pattern of entitlement and carelessness. Every piece of evidence I compiled felt like a weight lifting from my shoulders. This was more than revenge. It was justice. At night, I replayed the wedding livestream in my mind, each taunt from my sister and each laugh from Caleb fueling a fire I had not realized was still burning inside me. They had humiliated me publicly, but they had underestimated the patience of someone who had been ignored, who had labored silently for over a decade. I imagined the look on their faces when they realized the quiet underdog was the one holding all the power. I reached out to an old attorney friend under the guise of needing advice for a minor financial issue. The conversation was casual, but in reality, I was testing the waters, seeing how far the law could stretch to protect what was rightfully mine and hold him accountable. Every suggestion, every loophole, every subtle nudge felt like pieces of a chess game I had already begun to dominate. Then came the first real psychological victory. I discovered a small, overlooked clause in his condo agreement that gave me direct authority to terminate access under certain conditions. A surge of satisfaction ran through me. This was not just about money. It was control, leverage, finally tilting the scales. I had been the invisible hand for years, and now they would see the weight of my presence. But even as I built my fortress of evidence, Caleb remained unaware. He continued with his life, flaunting my father's watch, smiling at his wife's approval, completely blind to the storm brewing in the shadows. I imagined him, arrogant and untouchable, and I felt the first rush of the thrill that comes with knowing the fall was imminent. I decided it was time to strike a small, precise blow, something to unsettle him without revealing my full hand. I accessed the company truck account, rerouting payments and locking key privileges. I removed his access to the condo, leaving him with the illusion of normalcy until he would face the truth. Every action was calculated, silent, surgical. He would feel the tremor before the earthquake. The hardest part was waiting, watching him flaunt his wealth and audacity while knowing I had already rewritten the rules felt like holding lightning in my hands. And then, one afternoon, a small, almost imperceptible mistake from him gave me the opening I had been waiting for, the tiny slip that would let me escalate everything to the next level. The mistake was small, almost careless, which made it perfect. Caleb texted me asking for a quick favor, saying he needed written confirmation of past financial help for personal records. I stared at the message for a long time, a slow smile spreading across my face. After 13 years of taking without accountability, he was finally handing me what I needed in his own words. He still thought I was the soft sister, the one who would always rescue him without questions. I replied calmly, keeping my tone warm, familiar, harmless. I asked him to clarify what he meant, pretending I was confused. Within minutes, he sent a long message listing amounts, dates, and even admitting he had never intended to pay most of it back. Reading it felt surreal. The confession was casual, arrogant, as if my support had been an entitlement instead of a sacrifice. I saved everything, backed it up twice, and forwarded copies to a secure folder labeled simply Leverage. We met for coffee a few days later. He looked tired, irritated, distracted. He complained about small inconveniences, about access issues with the condo, about problems with the company truck. I listened quietly, nodding, offering sympathy, while inside I counted the seconds. When I asked him to sign a simple acknowledgement of the financial support I had provided, he barely hesitated. He signed it without reading closely, joking about how I always liked paperwork. That was the moment I knew it was over for him. Walking out of that cafe, the air felt different, lighter. I had spent years being underestimated, treated like background noise in my own family story. Now I held proof, signatures, records, and a clear legal path forward. This was not impulsive revenge. This was structure. This was accountability dressed in inevitability. That night, I laid everything out on my dining table like a map of his downfall. Total amounts, interest implications, legal classifications. I realized the number was far larger than I had ever admitted to myself. Over $500,000. Money I could have invested, saved, or used to build something for myself. Instead, I poured it into a man who laughed while I was humiliated in public. The clarity hurt, but it also freed me. I stopped responding to his messages after that. Silence became my strongest tool. While he grew anxious, I began the final preparations, consulting professionals, confirming timelines, and understanding exactly how the system would respond once I made my move. Everything was aligning with terrifying precision. The last thing I did before going to bed was open the live stream recording one more time. I paused it on the frame where Caleb smiled while my sister insulted me. I whispered one sentence into the empty room, not from anger, but certainty. Tomorrow, everything changes. The morning I made the call, my hands did not shake. I had rehearsed every word, every scenario, and yet the thrill of taking control made my pulse race. I contacted the IRS first, calmly explaining that over $538,000 in support I had provided to Caleb should be classified as forgiven debt. I enclosed his written acknowledgement and detailed records of every transaction. There was no room for negotiation. This was not retaliation. It was the law, and I was finally using it. Next came the condo. I submitted the paperwork terminating his access, citing clauses he had ignored for years. Then I moved to the company truck, repossessing it silently and efficiently, leaving him with no leverage, no escape. Every action was surgical, precise, and invisible. While he slept, I had dismantled the life he had taken for granted, brick by brick. When Caleb discovered his condo was locked, the truck repossessed, and a letter from the IRS sitting on his counter, his world tilted on its axis. I had been silent for so long that he did not anticipate the storm. He called me, panicked, pleading, trying to charm, threaten, and manipulate. I listened to his excuses, his anger, his disbelief. I let him speak, letting the sound of his unraveling fuel my quiet satisfaction. Even more intoxicating was the ripple effect. My sister, who had gleefully humiliated me during the wedding, suddenly faced a truth she had never imagined. Caleb's arrogance had protected her, but as he began to crumble financially and legally, she recoiled. Her smug confidence faltered when he admitted in private conversations that he could no longer sustain their lifestyle. Their household, once untouchable, became unstable overnight. I watched the chaos unfold without a single word from me. There was no gloating, no public display. This was far more satisfying than any confrontation or argument could have been. The people who had underestimated me, mocked me, and betrayed me now trembled under consequences they could not escape. And yet, the story was far from finished. The final act, the one that would leave him truly powerless and humiliated beyond repair, was still waiting. Late that evening, I received a voicemail from a law enforcement officer. His tone was neutral, almost polite, but the message was clear. Caleb had triggered serious tax liabilities, and investigations were now underway. My chest tightened with anticipation, knowing that the calm before the storm would not last. I leaned back, smiling for the first time in years, knowing I had rewritten the rules entirely. But then my phone buzzed again. Another message, this one from someone I had not expected, a cryptic warning hinting that Caleb was planning to strike back in a way I had not foreseen. My pulse quickened. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty entered the perfect equation I had constructed. The next morning, I woke to a quiet house, the kind of silence that feels heavy with anticipation, the kind that whispers that everything is about to change. Caleb's message from the night before still glowed on my phone, a mix of desperation, threats, and thinly veiled anger. He thought he could intimidate me. He thought I would bend. I did not. I never had. I had spent over a decade building a life of patience, of silent endurance, and now every hidden effort, every sacrifice was coming to fruition in ways he could not even begin to understand. The first wave hit him hard. His wife, the woman who had stood beside him during the wedding livestream, the woman who had laughed as I was humiliated, suddenly confronted a truth she could no longer ignore. The IRS notices, the frozen accounts, the repossessed truck, it all came crashing down on her too. I knew the moment she realized the scale of his reckless life that she would start distancing herself. And she did. That very evening, she packed her things, leaving him a note that was as cold and precise as my own plan. I cannot be part of this chaos. You are on your own. Caleb was left standing in the ruins of a life he assumed was untouchable. The condo was locked, the truck gone, his accounts frozen. The weight of legal and financial consequences pressed down on him like a storm he had no umbrella for. He called me incessantly, rage and panic lacing his voice, but I did not answer. I let him fester, let him experience the isolation he had so often imposed on me emotionally over the years. I was no longer a participant in his life. I was the unseen force that orchestrated his reckoning. Days later, I began hearing rumors through quiet channels, mutual friends, colleagues, even distant relatives. Caleb had started losing credibility professionally. His supposed success was a house of cards. Everyone who had once admired him began questioning his competence, his integrity, and even his morality. Invitations to events he had always taken for granted vanished. His social circle began to shrink as subtly and efficiently as a thief in the night. And each time I heard a fragment of news, a flicker of satisfaction warmed me, knowing that every move I had made was pushing him closer to collapse. Meanwhile, I kept meticulous records. Every IRS communication, every legal document, every financial maneuver he had failed to anticipate was archived, ready for any eventuality. I was prepared for retaliation, prepared for legal arguments, prepared for anything, but I did not expect how fast his own mistakes would accelerate the downfall I had already engineered. Caleb was unraveling faster than even I had imagined. Then came the arrest notice. It arrived in a neutral-toned envelope, but the words inside were devastatingly sharp. Tax evasion, unpaid debts, and fraudulent claims. Legal terminology that could crush him for years. I did not gloat. I simply exhaled, a long, slow release of a tension I had carried for over a decade. The person who mocked me, who humiliated me in front of the family, who stolen my father's Rolex and flaunted it, was now trapped by the very web he had spun for himself. I felt a strange combination of sorrow and satisfaction. This was justice, not malice. My sister, too, came knocking. Not at my door, she would never dare, but in whispers through family channels, trying to gauge my reaction, trying to salvage her reputation by blaming me for overreacting. I did not respond. Silence was my strongest weapon. She had underestimated me for years. She had laughed at my loyalty. Now she could only watch as the consequences she helped enable consumed her husband, her life, and her illusions of control. I attended the courthouse the day Caleb was brought in. I wore a simple suit, unremarkable, blending into the crowd, but inside I was an unstoppable force. Watching him escorted, bewildered, and humiliated through the marble halls was a surreal moment. His arrogance, his sense of entitlement, his public display of mockery, all of it had crumbled into dust. And yet, even in that moment, I was not done. There were still final measures to secure my own freedom, my own closure. The no-contact agreement was the last formal step. Caleb, now fully aware of the weight of his actions, had no choice but to sign. It was brief, bureaucratic, and absolute. I kept my emotions contained, presenting the paperwork as efficiently as I had orchestrated every previous move. One signature, one formal declaration, and he was finally bound, legally and emotionally, from ever harming me again. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt an unfamiliar lightness. The burden of guilt I had carried for years, supporting a man who never deserved it, excusing his arrogance, forgiving his betrayals, was gone. I realized I had not only protected myself, I had claimed back my life. Every late night, every sacrifice, every hidden effort had culminated in justice so complete it could not be denied. I returned home and sat at my desk, opening a blank document. I began drafting the foundation for a scholarship fund in my father's name, a legacy of support for those like me who had been underestimated, overlooked, or betrayed. My hands moved quickly, decisively, fueled by the lessons of the past. This was not just about revenge. It was about transforming pain into purpose, humiliation into empowerment. And yet, even as I mapped out the scholarship, I could not ignore the lingering shadows, the whispers of family, the remnants of relationships I had once cherished. They were gone, fractured beyond repair. I realized that some victories demanded a price higher than mere satisfaction, the price of letting go of those who could never value you. I understood, in that moment, that freedom was not just about winning, it was about walking away. That night, as I sat by the window watching the city lights flicker, a subtle sense of triumph mixed with a poignant ache. Caleb's life had been upended, my sister's illusions shattered, and yet I had been careful to maintain my integrity. I had not stooped. I had not acted impulsively. I had acted strategically, with patience, with precision. And still, the story felt unfinished, like the final frame of a film that demanded one more twist. Then, an unexpected email arrived in my inbox. No subject line, no sender I recognized. It contained a single line of text. "You think this is over? Think again." My pulse quickened, a shiver running down my spine. For the first time since the livestream, uncertainty crept in. Caleb's direct actions were contained, but this message hinted at something beyond him, something I had not yet accounted for. I stared at the screen, heart hammering, knowing that the final act, the true test of everything I had built, was still ahead. The email lingered on my screen, its words sharp and deliberate. "You think this is over? Think again." I stared at it, knowing instinctively that Caleb himself could not have sent this. He had no reach, no resources left. Whoever it was, they represented a final challenge, one last test of the patience, precision, and resolute I had cultivated for a decade. I took a deep breath, centering myself. For years, I had been the one quietly supporting, silently enduring, letting my own sacrifices be invisible while Caleb strutted in arrogance. That life was gone. The rules had changed. Now I was in command. Calmly, I traced the email back, analyzing headers, tracking metadata, and cross-referencing with contacts I had in my network. Within hours, I identified the sender, a distant cousin who had long been jealous of my family influence and had apparently hoped to sow chaos in Caleb's downfall. The threat was minor, manageable, but I treated it with the same meticulous care I had treated every previous step. I replied with precision and authority, setting boundaries, asserting control, and simultaneously sending clear signals that I could navigate any storm. It was a subtle power play, executed quietly yet decisively. Within a day, the cousin backed down, and I was left with the aftermath of Caleb's collapse unfolded swiftly. He faced legal proceedings, heavy tax liabilities, and public humiliation that rippled through the family and business circles. My sister vanished from my life entirely, retreating to protect her reputation, while Caleb was left alone, homeless, and without leverage. Watching from a distance, I felt neither gloating nor malice, only a deep, layered satisfaction. This was justice, but also a lesson carved in stone. Underestimate me at your own peril. I began to rebuild my life intentionally. I established the scholarship fund I had envisioned in my father's name, providing opportunities for students who, like me, had worked tirelessly in the shadows and been overlooked. Every grant awarded, every student supported became a testament to the strength I had discovered within myself during years of betrayal and public humiliation. The fund became more than a project. It became a legacy, a tangible proof that resilience and patience can transform pain into purpose. Friends and colleagues, once unaware of the depth of my intelligence and capability, began to notice. Opportunities I had quietly earned, often while managing Caleb's chaos, came to the forefront. I stepped into positions of leadership, influence, and visibility, all without ever betraying the ethics and integrity I had held on to, even when facing personal loss. My life, once defined by sacrifice and guilt, was now defined by control, purpose, and impact. Emotionally, I felt a liberation I had never imagined. The guilt that had weighed on me, supporting a brother who had mocked and exploited me, dissolved under the certainty that I had acted with justice and intelligence. The anger, once sharp and consuming, had been transformed into strategic clarity. Every moment of humiliation I had endured became a stepping stone toward empowerment. Every betrayal a lesson in foresight, and every silent effort a tool I wielded with precision. I occasionally allowed myself to revisit the live stream, the moment when my sister spat words meant to wound, and Caleb laughed as if my pain was entertainment. Instead of grief or rage, I felt a calm satisfaction. That memory, once a scar, was now a reminder of the power of patience and strategy. The underdog had not just survived, she had orchestrated a complete reversal of fortune. As weeks turned into months, I felt the final closure settle in. Caleb's legal matters were resolved. His financial collapse was complete. The scholarship fund flourished, providing both purpose and a tangible legacy. My home, once a place of quiet tension and hidden sacrifices, became a sanctuary of control, creativity, and freedom. And the past, while never forgotten, no longer dictated my emotional state. Sitting at my desk one evening, I paused and reflected on the journey, the betrayal, the humiliation, the painstaking strategy, the ultimate empowerment. I realized that revenge, when combined with intelligence, patience, and purpose, is not simply about punishment. It is about reclaiming your life, about transforming pain into power, about walking away stronger than you ever imagined possible. I closed my laptop and looked out the window. The city lights shimmered like stars brought to earth. I had won, not through brute force, not through anger, but through careful, calculated action, and through refusing to be invisible any longer. Every betrayal, every mockery, every stolen moment of dignity had become fuel for my triumph. And for the first time in years, I felt fully, completely, unshakably free. The past could no longer touch me, and the future was mine to build. A quiet smile spread across my face, and I whispered to the empty room, "This is only the beginning."